Over in the Netherlands, a big investment deal was inked between leading South Korean and Dutch chip companies in time for President Yoon's visit to the ASML headquarters. Today, the South Korean leader sits down with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte to further cement a chip alliance. South Korea plans to inject funds worth $29 billion into the rechargeable battery market over the span of 5 years to ramp up its competitive edge amid supply chain concerns. Pyeongchang is all set once again to host the Winter Games, this time for young people from all over the world. With the 2024 Youth Winter Olympics about a month away in the country's Gangwon province, we take a look at what's being done to inspire thousands of young athletes. It's December 13th, 2023. This is News Center.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Over in the Netherlands, a joint investment deal was inked between leading South Korean and Dutch chip companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This as President Yoon Suk-yeol visited the ASML headquarters, having highlighted semiconductor cooperation as the focus of his state visit to that country. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young begins our coverage.
South Korean and Dutch chip giants will jointly invest over $700 million to foster next-generation semiconductor technology and young specialists, as President Yoon Suk-yeol aims to solidify a semiconductor alliance with the Netherlands. On Tuesday, the South Korean leader visited the production facility of ASML, the world's biggest supplier of lithography machines, crucial for making semiconductors. Accompanied by Dutch King Willem-Alexander and the heads of Samsung and SK Hynix, Lee Jae-yong and Choi Tae-won, Yoon oversaw the signing of 3 memorandums of understanding on developing cutting-edge microchips, which make up almost 20% of South Korea's exports.
ASML이 만들어낸 반도체 산업의 혁신은 인공지능, 5G, 모빌리티 등 4차 산업혁명의 강력한 동력이 되고 있습니다. 앞으로 한국 기업들과 긴밀히 협력해서 반도체 산업의 혁신과 글로벌 공급망 안정화를 위해 노력해 주시기를 기대합니다.
Samsung and ASML agreed to jointly invest some $763 million into an R&D center based in South Korea to develop ultrafine processing technology based on next-generation extreme ultraviolet or EUV lithography. Meanwhile, SK Hynix also signed a deal with ASML to co-develop hydrogen recovery technology for EUVs, recycling rather than burning hydrogen to use as process gas. This is expected to reduce power usage by around 20% and save $12.5 billion in costs annually. Another MOU was reached between the Korean and Dutch governments to establish a chip academy for graduate students beginning in February, involving the two nations' top chip-related firms and institutions, including Samsung and ASML, to offer practical training with cutting-edge equipment and facilities.
Growing talent together and sharing know-how is something that only a true semiconductor alliance can do, and we expect that exchanges between future generations in the industry will become more active.
Yoon's economic secretary noted that the deals were inked as global foundries like Samsung, TSMC and Intel scramble to master the production of ultrafine 2nm chips, around 10 to 15 times faster than 3nm models, which were first mass-produced last year by Samsung. As their rivalry intensifies, he noted that the president toured ASML's cleanroom facility, featuring an advanced lithography machine which has never been shown publicly before. This, he said, casts optimistic prospects for South Korean firms looking to secure key materials and equipment to boost their chip-making capacity. Celebrating the budding cooperation, the South Korean leader and the Dutch king both signed a semiconductor wafer for display at the cleanroom facility.
President Yoon will further discuss strengthening bilateral chip cooperation with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte when they meet at The Hague on Wednesday. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Amsterdam.
And prior to that summit scheduled for Wednesday, President Yoon and Dutch King Willem-Alexander reaffirmed a cordial friendship at a state banquet. Also noted was the two countries' deep history of bilateral relations over 60 years in the making. Correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
At the first state banquet for a South Korean president at the Royal Palace of Amsterdam on Tuesday, President Yoon gave a special shout-out to the Dutchman that brought a special moment to all Koreans in recent history.
2002년 대한민국 국민들의 가슴을 뜨겁게 달군 월드컵 4강 신화의 중심에는 네덜란드 출신의 명장 거스 히딩크 감독이 계십니다. 어디 계십니까?
This was his way of showing that South Korea and the Netherlands share a deep relationship that goes beyond semiconductor cooperation. The diplomatic relationship was established more than 60 years ago, and the two countries last year upgraded the relationship to a strategic partnership. Also, he reminded everyone that the first Westerner to become naturalized to what at the time was the Joseon dynasty was a Dutchman, Jan Jans Veltebri, or in Korean, Pak Yeon. King Willem-Alexander also noted that South Korea has grown tremendously in just a couple of years, and Koreans and the Dutch are culturally connected.
The Republic of Korea is everywhere. There's K-pop on the radio, K-movies in the cinema, K-dramas on Netflix, and K-food in the supermarket.
Above all, the two leaders underscore the shared values that the two countries are based on, something that has become increasingly important with uncertainties around the world.
국제법 질서를 발전시켜야 할 의무를 헌법에 규정한 네덜란드야말로 규범 기반 국제 질서를 선도하고 있는 것입니다. 대한민국도 세계의 자유, 평화, 번영을 위해 책임과 기여를 다하는 글로벌 중추 국가로서 규범 기반 국제 질서의 강화에 힘을 쏟고 있습니다.
This comes as President Yoon started official engagements for the state visit on Tuesday at the welcoming ceremony at Dam Square in Amsterdam, which included a 21-gun salute and a greeting from Korean children. After heading inside the palace, the president and the Dutch king introduced their delegations, including Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Prime Minister Rutte, according to President Yoon himself, is one of the leaders most close to him on the global scene. And Yoon was accompanied by Rutte as he went to lay a wreath at the National Monument at the Dam to commemorate the Dutch war heroes. The official welcoming at the palace ended with a luncheon hosted by the king. There, President Yoon thanked the king for his hospitality, saying his state visit to South Korea in 2014, a first for a Dutch king, boosted the bilateral relationship back then, and his visit to the Netherlands is another milestone. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Later in the day, the South Korean president is expected to visit Ridderzaal and the Ean Peace Museum in The Hague as part of his state visit. Ean, he brings us what historical significance these places in the Netherlands hold for Korea.
A city in the Netherlands, The Hague, holds sites with special meaning to Korean history. First is the Ridderzaal, a venue where the Second Hague Peace Conference was held back in 1907. 3 secret envoys of Korea tried to attend the conference to appeal to the international community about the unfairness of the 1905 treaty Japan forcibly imposed on Korea. Amid growing pressure from Japan, Emperor Gojong of the Korean Empire sent 3 envoys, Lee-jun, Lee Sang-seol, and Lee Wi-jong, to the conference. However, the mission failed due to obstruction by Japan, and Lee-jun was later found dead at the hotel they were staying at. While the cause of his death is unclear, the ideals that the patriot Lee-jun stood for later transformed the place of his death, Hotel Deong, into the Ean Peace Museum. The Ean Peace Museum was established in August 1995 on the 50th anniversary of Korea's liberation to preserve a place of importance to Korea's independence movement in Europe, while serving as an educational site to teach future generations about the spirit of patriotism and peace around the world. Its exhibits include handwritten documents and news article clippings from the time, alongside other historical artifacts. According to local media, President Yoon will visit Ridderzaal and Ean Peace Museum and will express his determination to defend democracy and world peace based on South Korea's strong national defense capabilities and global leadership. The president's visit to The Hague comes during his state visit to the Netherlands to strengthen semiconductor cooperation and other ties. Eun Hee, Arirang News.
Korean financial authorities plan to inject some 38 trillion won, that's almost $30 billion, for Korea's rechargeable battery market over the course of 5 years. It's to ramp up its competitive edge amid concerns over supply chains. An Sung-jin explains.
The South Korean government plans to inject some $29 billion into the rechargeable battery industry over the space of 5 years from 2024. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho, in an emergency economic meeting on Wednesday, discussed ways to enhance industrial competitiveness in the rechargeable battery industry.
We plan to actively support facility investment in promising rechargeable battery companies and to develop core technologies such as all-solid-state batteries. We will also shorten the patent examination period from the current 21 months to 10 months by prioritizing rechargeable battery patents.
It also plans to foster an ecosystem for recycled batteries in order to reduce dependency on critical raw material supplies from abroad. Instead of treating used batteries as waste, the plan is to transform them into recyclable products if they meet the criteria. If recycled, some can be remanufactured for electric vehicles, while those that are difficult to reuse will be recycled by extracting only valuable metals such as lithium and nickel. The government estimated that if all used batteries were recycled, it would secure enough key minerals for 170,000 electric vehicles annually, which is half of what Hyundai and Kia produce in a year. To further stabilize the supply chain, the government will increase loans for related companies and support interest rate reductions for facility investment in North America in response to the Inflation Reduction Act. To support critical raw material reserves and prevent a supply chain crisis in the long term, it plans to invest in building storage facilities by 2026 to store lithium, cobalt, and other vital raw materials for rechargeable batteries. At the meeting, measures to combat shrinkflation or package downsizing were also discussed. Data from the Korea Consumer Agency found that nearly 40 items have been downsized over the past 1 year. The government will seek to make it necessary for sellers to show any dosage changes on product packaging and for them to indicate the unit price.
It will become mandatory to label any changes on goods. We plan to thoroughly check whether this is properly implemented through consumer agencies or reporting centers.
The government also pledged to pay close attention to inflation and amend relevant regulations if necessary. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Amid recent urea import concerns triggered by supply issues in China, South Korea is seeking ways to diversify its sources of key industrial materials to stabilize supply chains. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced today that it'll establish robust industrial supply chains for 185 designated items, including graphite and magnetic rare earth metals. Under the strategy, the country aims to lower its dependency on specific countries for certain resources to under 50% by 2030, down from last year's 70%. To achieve this goal, the government plans to support domestic production of key materials wherever possible. Also on the local front, employment expanded in November as well, albeit at a smaller size on month. Park Go-nu covers the latest numbers.
South Korea's employment figures rose once again last month, but with a smaller increase than October. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, 277,000 jobs were added on year in November, bringing the total number of workers aged 15 and over to some 28,600,000.
By industry, employment numbers were added especially in the science, health, and welfare and IT sectors, and by age, those aged 60 and above, and people in their 30s and 50s attributed to the increasing figures.
But figures for other sectors, including education and real estate, all fell. Job additions had been on the increase from July, reaching a peak of 346,000 new jobs on year in October. But additions dropped last month, with fewer jobs in the accommodation and food service sector, which fell 50,000 in October to less than 10,000 last month. Statistics Korea also said the slower pace of increasing jobs was due to the base effect, as employment soared after the easing of COVID-19 measures. Manufacturing jobs have fallen for 11 straight months since January, with a decrease of 110,000 workers last month, which also contributed to November's smaller increase. Last month's employment rate of 63.1% was an all-time high for any November, since records were first compiled in 1982. An official from Statistics Korea said that the increasing demand for babysitters after COVID-19 boosted the employment rate, especially among women in their 50s. In terms of the unemployment figures, There was a drop for people in their 20s and a rise for those in their 50s, with the total remaining at 2.3%, the same as last November. Park Geon-woo, Arirang News.
Starting Thursday, foreigners will be allowed to invest in the South Korean stock market without prior authorization. The Financial Services Commission has announced that accessibility to local markets for foreign investors will be enhanced with the abolition of the foreign investor registration system. Currently, foreigners are obligated to register with the Financial Supervisory Service before investing in the local stock market. This registration process has been identified as an obstacle for foreigners entering the local stock market, as it's considered time-consuming and requires various documents for registration. Turning to the Israel-Hamas war, amid U.S. President Joe Biden calling for a change in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hardline approach over Gaza, he will be sending his top security advisor and defense chief to Israel sooner than later. Moon Hae-ryun explains what this could bring to the conflict in the war zone.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is set to travel to Israel within the week to discuss a timetable for the war as Israel and its longtime ally, the United States, face diplomatic isolation over bombings in Gaza. Another top White House official, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, will visit next week to reiterate U.S. President Joe Biden's message to protect civilian lives in the war-torn region. Biden warned his Israeli counterpart that the indiscriminate bombing against Hamas was hurting global support, proven by the non-binding resolution passed in the United Nations General Assembly on Tuesday, which called for a humanitarian ceasefire. An overwhelming majority of 153 countries voted in favor, while only 10, including the US, voted against, showing the consensus regarding the conflict. Biden also said that Netanyahu needed to change his government dominated by hardline right parties, calling it the most conservative government in Israel's history, as they ultimately can't say no to an independent Palestinian state. The Israeli Prime Minister admitted that while there was a disagreement between the two allies, he expressed hope that the two sides could reach an agreement regarding what he called the post-Hamas Gaza Strip. While Sullivan is due to hold talks about this matter, Netanyahu is against Biden's idea to allow the Palestinian Authority to govern the Gaza Strip following the end of the armed conflict. This rift between the US and Israel and the show of global support for a ceasefire comes amid continued airstrikes in the enclave, creating what the chief of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees has called hell on earth. Hamas officials said that at least 50 people were killed in the bombings following the UN General Assembly meeting. More than 18,000 Palestinians have reportedly been killed, with many being women or children. Meanwhile, Reuters reported that there are 135 hostages still being held captive by Hamas, while the Israeli government commented that 19 are presumed to have been killed. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Countries have struck a UN climate deal calling for a transition away from fossil fuels. At the COP28 climate summit in Dubai on Wednesday, representatives from almost 200 nations agreed to reduce global consumption of fossil fuels to avoid the worst climate catastrophe. The agreement, which comes after 2 weeks of hard-fought debates, is the first of its kind to have language on fossil fuels. The approved deal pushes the nations to make plans to break off from coal, oil, and gas in order to achieve net zero by 2050. It also urges countries to triple their renewable energy capacity globally by 2030. Thinking about winter here in Korea, one iconic event that comes to mind is the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Well, 6 years later, Korea is gearing up to host the Winter Olympics once again, this time for aspiring young talents. As we count down to the 2024 Gangwon Winter Youth Olympics, our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin gives us a sneak peek into what awaits us in just over a month.
As we get ready for another thrilling year in sports, 2024 gets off to a thrilling start with the Winter Youth Olympics Gangwon 2024. The Youth Olympic Games is for teens aged between 15 and 18 years old. It's held every 4 years and has the same sports and disciplines as the regular Winter Olympics we're familiar with.
South Korea is the first country in Asia to host the Youth Winter Games and the only one on the continent to host the Summer, Winter and Youth Olympic Games. Around 19,000 athletes and staff from over 80 countries are set to take part in the event.
Young athletes will have a chance to compete on the same courses and venues that Olympians did a few years ago. You can't miss out on curling when talking about the Winter Olympics in Korea after Team Kim won Korea's first ever curling Olympic medal at the 2018 Pyeongchang Games. Korea's curlers are hoping to make history again.
We're determined to give our all at the Games so that we can secure a gold medal at the exact venue where Team Kim, who are from the same hometown as us, clinched silver.
Adding a fresh twist to the Games is ice hockey. On top of the traditional 6-team tournament, the Youth Olympics exclusively has a 3-on-3 tournament. Meanwhile, over in Pyeongchang County, the Alpensia Sliding Center has lowered the starting line for the luge so that the course is smoother and less steep for the safety of the young athletes. And at the nearby ski jumping center, it's not just about competing. The venue will also host a range of hands-on events for teenagers, from mini ski jumping to cross-country skiing tryouts. With little more than a month left, Gangwon province is making last-minute preparations so that teenagers, just like its slogan, can grow together. The Youth Olympic Games will kick off on January 19th and run until February 1st. 송유진, Arirang News, Pyeongchang.
Temperatures will stay milder than usual nationwide. The highs in Seoul will rise up to 10 degrees Celsius. But from tomorrow to Friday, there will be some severe winter rain all over the country. After this rain stops, an Arctic cold wave of around minus 10 degrees Celsius will come around. This weekend, the morning temperature in Seoul will plummet to minus 11 degrees Celsius, diving into cold winter conditions. As for the amount of rain, over 120 millimeters of rain is expected in Gangwon province by Friday. More than 100 millimeters of heavy rain will fall in Gyeonggi-do, Chungcheong-do, and Gyeongsang-do provinces. 30 to 80 millimeters in Seoul and other central regions. Also, heavy snow of up to 30 centimeters is in the forecast for mountainous areas of Gangwon province. Expect cloudy skies for the morning. Seoul will start off at 7 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will reach 10 degrees. Gwangju and Gyeongju, 14 degrees. The cold wave will return to grip the whole country heading into the weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.